Hey there, Jeff Manchester, Manchester Music. Welcome. In this video, I'm talking about 4 mistakes composers make that you really have to avoid or try not making. And these are based on my own experience in this industry for a little while now. I have made them and I have paid for them. So, before we get started though, make sure you're subscribed, hit the bell icon. New videos go up every Monday. That way you're informed with the content I'm putting out there, and I would very much appreciate it. So, mistake number 1, avoiding the spotting session. To some composers, the spotting session might be like this weird term. What is it? It is your chance to sit down with the director and watch the film, documentary, short film, whatever it is, together and talk about what kind of music, what kind of direction, what you think might sound cool where, beat by beat, scene by scene, all the way to the end. In remote times, I think people think that this can't be done. This needs to be done with a cue sheet, or you need to send them off something and then they write everything. If you can, sit down and watch the film with them. Even remotely, there's ways to, hit the play button at the same time, or there's services you can use. If you avoid this critical session, then I think you're only working with, half of the information. And you're also missing a chance to sit down and really understand the vision of the director that they put into this very, personal piece of art. When you sit down with a director, you can relate, you can make jokes, you can understand what was going on, you can hit the pause button and they can explain something that happened, and that might spark an idea as you're taking notes and they're taking notes about what to do next or where to go, and you can pull out your phone and be like, oh, so I was thinking something like this, and play something back and play it against the scene even. And then anyway, this is just such a critical ritual that happens before any music ever gets made that I think is maybe deprioritized a little bit, or perhaps even not known about from people making films and people composing for films these days. But it is so critical that you don't skip this step. It's a great relationship building tool, and it also just gives you a chance to see the film without any music with the director and just have that blank canvas, and then go home, look at all your notes, and then start working. So please don't skip the spotting session. It is critical, and it has always kind of benefited, I think, the music and the end product. And I'm better for having done it than having skipped it. So that would be the number 1 mistake, is do not skip that spotting session. Mistake number 2, not using references. Now, directors, some of them do play instruments, some of them know what they're talking about when it comes to music, but really their domain of expertise is putting together a story. Sometimes having to produce it or act as DP or all that other stuff. They do not know very much about music, so they might give you a couple of ideas and references, or they might just give you some words. It's really up to you to make sure you understand what they're asking of you. And back in the olden times, I don't know how they did it, but now you have the internet. And one service that I use, I'm not endorsed by them or anything, is MusicBed. And you can type in a number of, cues, or not cues, but modifiers like dreamy, playful, or whatever, and then send those off and be like, is this kind of what you had in mind when you wrote playful for cue number 68 that happens at timecode whatever? If you don't do this stuff and then get to work and send something off, you've wasted your time. And yeah, you could argue that, Jeff, I'll just use that wasted cue and just keep it in my backpack and use it in my reel or something. And that's probably true. But wouldn't you rather spend time actually knowing what it is you have to do and knowing what the director wants? Having a reference that sounds like something they've written down. Again, I want something somber but energetic. Type those terms into a service like MusicBed. I'm sure there's a whole bunch out there. Send those over and be like, is that kind of what you're looking for? And if they say yes, obviously don't rip them off completely, but get inspired by them. Listen for the different instrumentation that's a part of that reference. And then you go forward with the confidence that you're on the right track and you're not going to get a ton of notes, maybe none at all, but you're not going to get rejected because what you had as an idea for playful is totally different than what they had as an idea for playful. And let's be real, directors are always thinking about other people's music, even though they don't know the terms to describe that music themselves. They'll send you a reference and say, oh, I like the sound of this Zimmer track, or I like the sound of this whatever track. Really help them understand and set the context for what they're asking by using references and sending them over so that everyone is on the same page and you are not wasting your time. using too many sample libraries in a project. I've run into this before where I have really taken advantage of all the sample libraries I am lucky enough to have, and that can be fun, choice can be fun, but what often happens is if you're composing for one short film or a documentary series or something like that, and you've got a whole bunch of different colors in there, it just ends up being a big mudslide, and there's no kind of continuity or uniformity to the sound, and every cue kind of sounds like it belongs in a bit of a different film and in a different family. You want all of your cues, especially if they're going in something like a narrative piece or a documentary across a bunch of different, episodes, you want them all to have the same DNA, more or less. And yes, they can vary, especially if the director is asking for something very specific and off the beaten path of what you were composing before. But when you use a bunch of different libraries, a bunch of different strings and keys and everything like that, unless you really know what you're doing, and I certainly don't, you can run into trouble and have this real identity crisis from one cue to the next, and there's no consistency. When you listen to official soundtracks and go, start to finish, unless you have like a Céline Dion song in there that's like mixed into the original score, you'll notice a kind of consistency between track and track and track, and that could be in the instrumentation. That could be in a certain instrument that appears, over and over and over in the middle of other instruments to add that kind of through line from start to finish. When you have this, all these different libraries and you can go in all these different directions, that might be really cool. But you look at the final picture and you realize, wow, nothing really belongs in the same kind of family tree. This is all kind of over the place. So try to stick to a couple of different sample libraries, maybe 3, 4, or 5. And when you're composing a new cue and you've already committed to a certain string sample library, go back to that string sample library. Go back to that percussion library. Go back to that, sample pack that got you some interesting tools. Don't venture too far out, because pretty soon you end up with a bit of a mess that, again, suffers from, I think, a kind of sonic identity crisis. And plus, I think that by restricting yourself to just a couple of choices, a couple of palettes, a couple of sample libraries, you will probably find yourself being more creative because you place some restrictions on where you can go and what you can do. And you'll really want to make the most of all the patches, all the articulations, and all the sounds that only a couple sample libraries have to offer. Not listening to your exports. I know that we live in 2022 and DAWs and, things are so smart, everything sounds good, everything sounds really realistic, but you really have to listen to what you've exported. In fact, this is what mix engineers do all the time. They will go off and listen to their mixes. They walk the dog or shovel the driveway just to hear how it sounds when you're away from the console, from your kind of workstation. You can hear things differently. You can bring someone into the room and listen to the stereo track, and you'll hear things differently because you're almost hearing through their ears. So there's a kind of, there's something kind of weird that happens when you separate yourself from, the ones and zeros in the DAW and just put a stereo mix on. You can hear that maybe something needs to be louder, something isn't panned right, something is kind of confused or missing, or wow, in my room everything sounds great, but on my headphones, I'm losing a lot of low end. I got to work on that. I got to bring that back up. But the other reason for listening to what you've made is for technical problems. So sometimes you'll get export issues where there's like weird errors or clicks and pops or even like a dropout. There's nothing worse than, feeling like you're all done. You send all your stuff off and then you have someone going like, why is that thing so quiet? Or why is there a weird pop? Is that pop or is that click or is that kind of like clipping part of what you intended? And then you realize that, there's just a quantization error or something happening in your digital audio workstation that's added something you didn't intend in the cue. And you have to kind of go over and start again. So just do a quick QC pass, quality control pass, by listening to what you've exported the minute after you export it. And then take it out once you're like, okay, this is free of clicks and pops and errors. Go to another place and just listen to it and just kind of, do something else and have it kind of come in a little bit like background music and see how you feel and see if something needs to go up or go down or even see if when you bring things all the way down, if you can still hear the main event, that main kind of legato violin line that you wrote or something that still kind of comes through in low volume context. So it's so critical to listen to what you're doing because other people are going to be, and they're not going to be checking it out in this big session. They're going to be hearing it in the context of a cue or just far away from where you started your session. And also, like I said, I've run into this before where there's a click, there's a pop, and it wasn't there in the DAW, but it's there in the audio file. And of course you can use a tool like RX or any noise restoration stuff to get rid of that, or just go back into the session and export it again, listen back, make sure it's not there, and then keep moving. So those are 4, I think, mistakes that I've run into and that I want you to avoid in your composing journeys. So anyway, thank you so much for watching. Curious what your tips or mistakes are that you've made. If these are interesting or new to you, maybe they're not, you know everything. Let me know in the comments and let other people know what mistakes that you've run into so that they can avoid them. And that'll be it for me. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.